Naomi Osaka episode raises several serious questions, not only in relation to the way the sports are conducted in the world today, but also about the emphasis that's being given to the mental health issues in the contemporary world. So before I get into the issue, let me tell you for the benefit of those who might not be knowing about this episode. Naomi Osaka is a 23-year-old tennis star. She has won 4 Grand Slams today. She was playing in the French Open tennis. Just before playing French Open tennis, she has won the Australian Open. So this 23-year young girl is the number 2 in the ranking of the world tennis. And she is one of the most highly paid tennis star in the world. She is considered to be the future Martina Navratilova or future Steffi Graf of like the legendary tennis stars. She is considered to be a potential legend in the world of tennis. So she was playing French Open tennis and she had announced her premature exit from the French Open tennis tournament, which kicked off the controversy. What is the reason for coming out of the tournament? So these international tournaments have an inbuilt condition that the sportsmen and women, after every match, whether they win or lose, they are forced to address the international media. That's a part of the contract. They're just not playing the court, but they have to face the media too. So unfortunately, the Osaka was not so comfortable addressing the international media because she said she is suffering from anxiety, depression, and the mental health issues. So she said that she is an introvert and she can't speak to international media. But the French Open tennis was so cruel, so they insisted on her meeting the media. Not only they insisted, when she refused to address the media, she was fined with $15,000. Well, that's not a big amount for her because she is one of the most highly paid and most sought after tennis star. But the problem was the federation was even contemplating much serious action of suspending her from the Grand Slams also. So she, in such a controversial situation, she voluntarily announced her exit from the tournament. She was so fine when she said, I don't want the attention should be diverted from the sport, so there should not be any detraction, so I'm pulling out of the sport. So this raised a big controversy in the sporting fraternity and across the world. So millions and millions of people have come in support of the Naomi Osaka. Well, international sports stars, especially the tennis stars, face several hurdles because they undergo a very serious physical and mental stress, especially at the highest levels of stress because they are playing international tournaments. And the achievement and fame comes at a very young age. They travel alone because there is an individual sport, tennis. So obviously they are away from the family at a very young age. And constantly the struggle to achieve will be haunting them. And obviously they have to handle with the status of a celebrity. So all this create additional mental pressure on them. So at this point of time, well, some of them may cope up, some of them may not. So the sporting federation should have a sympathetic view. So instead of having a sympathetic view, they are insisting that they have to speak to the international media. Well, speaking to international media is nothing to do with the sport. It is essentially part of the propaganda publicity mechanism. Well, if somebody is willing to speak to media, fine. But if somebody has a genuine medical reason for not speaking to media, why should such a great player be penalized for that? So you can't lose Naomi Osaka for the sake of the French Tennis Federation publicity or propaganda exercise like meeting the media. Well, that is the fundamental question that's being raised today. So you can't lose Osaka for the sake of such a publicity. And not just the individual players playing individual sports like tennis, even players in football and cricket also suffer from serious mental health issues. And the pandemic has aggravated the mental health scenario today across the world. So in this situation, it's absolutely ridiculous for the French Open tennis to insist on Osaka speaking to media. Well, she was candid enough. She has publicly declared and she has written to the federation that she suffers from anxiety disorder, she suffers from depression and can't really handle the media because of her very personality trait, as she is an introvert. And assuming that assuming that a tennis star is suffering from speech disabilities, will you still insist that particular star to speak to media? So like the physical disability or the physical disorders or the physical ailments, well, mental health issues are also quite common. And unfortunately, they're not being reported, they're not being talked about openly. So there's a lot of stigma attached to it. So the French Open tennis attitude has seriously questioned this kind of an approach to the otherwise a normal medical problem. So this is the reason why the French Open tennis is now being accused of suffering from the mental health disorder rather than Osaka. So the world is in support of Osaka today. The world is expressing solidarity with it. This forced the French Open tennis to come out with almost a near apology, expressing her sympathies with Osaka and expressing their willingness to assist Osaka. So Osaka Naomi doesn't need assistance. She doesn't need sympathy. She just needs solidarity. She just needs a humane handling of her concern. So instead of expressing sympathy and coming forward to assist her, she can take care of her mental health problems. But the federation should revisit their policy of forcing the sportsmen and women to address the international media as an obligation which is equal to playing the sport also. Such a ridiculous stand the sports federation should immediately do away with.